Welcome back to another episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. My name is Jay Ellison, and I am thrilled that you've joined us today for another episode. I think this one's going to be a great one. I'm super excited. We have a wonderful guest joining us today. His name is Ron Fournier from the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Thanks for joining us today, Ron.
Jay, thanks for having me. Looking forward to spending some time with you.
Absolutely. Ron and I have known each other for a little while through the Hunter Ed channels and running into each other at meetings, but I'm excited to sit down and have a conversation about how he got started in hunting, some views that he has in hunting, and to talk about what they've got going on in Maine as it relates to novice hunters. So, Ron, I would love to open the floor to give you a chance to introduce yourself, what you do, all that good stuff.
Sure. So my name is Ron Fournier, and I'm the Recreational Safety Supervisor for the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. And my responsibility is to oversee our hunter education program in Maine. So trapper education, archery, we have a bear trapping course. And I also oversee power sports safety, so ATV safety, snowmobile, and boater education. And I've got a few other responsibilities. I'm involved with search and rescue in an administrative level within the department, and our remedial ethics course. So if you get caught baiting deer or hunting at night, I'll have a little sit down with you and we'll get you back out on the right track here. So a lot of different responsibilities within the department in safety, and within my whole role, R3 is really intertwined in helping to support tomorrow's hunters outdoors folks with lots of other programs. So yeah, professionally, and outside of my day-to-day job, I'm a master Maine guide. I've been guiding for about 20 years in Maine. Nice thing about guiding is I can there's an ebb and a flow. Like I can, some years I don't participate quite as much just with my work obligations and family, but I've been guiding predominantly big game hunting, bear, deer, moose, and turkey, and some fishing and whatnot. So very connected to the outdoors and the Maine landscape, and just love what I do. Professionally and personally.
If you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that you're either thinking about hunting for the first time or trying to get better at it. Either way, you need to start with the right foundation. And that's why I'm so excited for the Evolving Hunter podcast to be partnering with CertifiedHunter.com. Certified Hunter offers state-approved online hunter education that's built for real people, not just test takers. You'll learn firearm safety, ethical decision-making, wildlife conservation, and what it actually means to be a responsible hunter in the field. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about checking a box. It's about showing up prepared, confident, and safe when the season opens. I didn't grow up hunting. I started later in life, and I can tell you firsthand that having clear, practical training makes a huge difference. Certified Hunter helps shorten the learning curve and sets you up to do this the right way from day one. So, if you're ready to take your first step into hunting, or you know someone who is, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolving hunter and get started today. Again, that's CertifiedHunter.com/evolving hunter, and let's start the right way. Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like you're super involved with all of that. So we'll get down the road and talk about some of the guiding stuff, which I think I'm really excited to talk about. But I'd love to kind of set the foundation a little bit first and talk about how you got into hunting. And I'd love to kind of talk about how that evolved into what you do today, and all the involvement that you have with the Agency of Maine.
Yeah. Recently I've been working on some projects within the department that have given me an opportunity to really reflect and look back. And I think a lot of times in life, we don't tend to look in the rearview mirror sometimes deliberately. And it really gave me a vantage point to kind of dig into my roots. And I think my outdoors interest started with my dad. My father was a police officer. I grew up in a law enforcement family, always around guns. Gun safety was integral in my family and whatnot, and taught us at a young age about respecting firearms, but also opened the doors to us to shoot recreationally and kind of demystify firearms. So there wasn't that, curiosity that gets you in trouble sometimes. And he actually really got me into fishing. So fishing was like my gateway into the outdoors. And I remember the old Zebco 202, spin cast reel with a red and white Daredevil, going out and catching pickerel and perch and stuff like that. And that was like my first taste of the outdoors beyond my backyard and roaming around the woods as a Gen X child, unsupervised and, come home by dinner.
Wild
But
and feral, roaming
yeah,
the
Errol,
roaming the
completely
woods of Maine.
Errol. Life lessons learned, I think, we were beyond our years. And then I think it's through fishing, um, I have early memories of like picking up the Field and Stream magazines and Outdoor Life and that sort of stuff, and just pouring through the pages and seeing all these, fishing and outdoors and survival and hunting stories, and reading some of the more notable, writers of the day. But growing up around guns and having that connection to fishing and the outdoors, I had this curiosity, but I did not come from a hunting family. I mean, my father and I, it wasn't something that was taught to me. And I did have some uncles that did some hunting, but I didn't find that out until I guess later on, a few years later. But just through that inquisitiveness, I begged for a BB gun. That was like the one thing I wanted under the Christmas tree was that BB gun. And like a lot of I think young folks in our time, I started with the Crossman 760 Pump Master, and put a lot of put a hurting on the squirrels and whatnot. But actually, looking back, I remember an uncle actually talking about hunting with my BB gun or a 22, and he said you'll learn so many fundamental hunting skills by hunting small game with a BB or a pellet, shot placement, empathy for an animal's life, and all those things. And I would skin things out, and I'd eat what I shot. And in my mind, I was a hunter. Like I was having adventures and trying to find gray squirrels and things like that. But I had no mentor, no. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know there was hunting seasons or bag limits or no. And was not uncommon to come home in the middle of the summer with a bag full of squirrels and a woodchuck and maybe a rabbit. Um, and then I remember an uncle of mine that I was coming home one day with something, and he's like, I don't think those are in season. And I looked at him, I said, what do you mean in season? He said, we need to get you into a hunter education class. So my dad signed me up for, a hunter ed class, which was more the traditional format. It was, I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was like 4 or 5 weeks, two nights a week, couple of hours each night. And man, did I pour through that hunter ed manual. I hung on every word. I'd sit there and study at night with a flashlight, and that was like the gateway to like getting to be a licensed hunter. And but throughout those years, I was just really just having adventures and kind of, I guess, making mistakes and kind of finding my way. So my dad and I did hunter education together. It was kind of a nice experience to have that bonding moment with my dad. And you know, jokingly, when I think we left the class, I think I scored 1 point higher than he did, and so I'll never let him live that down.
Exactly.
But yeah, so then I had acquired a 22. Had a hand-me-down 22 rifle that I still have, and means the world to me, because that really opened the door to being able to hunt for bigger things and whatnot. And I was again just my generation. I had a paper route. That was my income, and I remember maybe 9, 10 years old, peddling newspapers around town, and you end up with a little bit of change in your pocket. And I saved my money until I could afford a Remington Wingmaster 870 pump. Still have that gun. It's another one that will never leave the rack. And well, at least the rack gets a lot of use, but it's never gonna leave my possession.
Yeah.
But that opened the door to hunting other species and whatnot. And my uncle Mark, he is my dad's youngest brother, big family. He's got 9 brothers and sisters, and so Mark was closest in age to me, but he was still about 10 or 12 years older than I was. And once I got my hunter education, he got me involved with the youth waterfowl program within the state. And we had to do a bunch of classes and like duck identification and stuff like that. And then we went to the range, we shot sporting clays, and we were getting ready for a youth hunt where they would assign us a blind and a guide or a mentor. And I had a mentor, which was my uncle. And so that was going to be my gateway. And before we actually got to that hunt, he asked me if I wanted to go on a duck hunt with him, opening day. So I remember that night, staying in this log cabin and just the wheels turning, like what tomorrow was going to look like, getting ready with the decoys and the canoe and all that stuff. And we get up at dark 30 and headed out to the pond. And I remember every detail of paddling that canoe across the pond and setting up a little makeshift blind and just sitting there watching the day kind of waking up. And you could hear ducks overhead, but you couldn't see anything. And I'm trying to identify different species by, wing beat or whatever he's telling me, oh, those are woodies or those are teal. And I got the nod, maybe 2 minutes before shooting light. He's like, all right, get ready. It's going to be on. And literally like to the second opening light, and we had green wing teal coming in like our freight train, and we started shooting, and we end up having probably like a 3-hour hunt. I think I got three ducks myself. First time shooting moving targets that were flying at like 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
And just everything from the mist on the water and the smell of the shot shell and the noise that the decoys made when you threw in. Everything was really ingrained. And I remember leaving that day truly thinking that my life has changed forever. And I mean that to this day. I look back and I knew that the path forward was going to be different because I was a hunter. It was like a real hunt. I had support, I had mentorship. And yeah, so we paddled off the lake and brought the ducks home and field dressed them and had them for dinner that night. And I just was hungry for more. So we get to the youth waterfowl program. I went through that and then actively started, with waterfowl and started working into other species. And from there, we bought my uncle's bow. He was upgrading, and I had an old bear bow. This is a compound bow that was probably produced in the 70s and heavy and clunky and all that, and probably a little too big for me. But I managed to get on target, and I started bow hunting for a couple of years, and then deer hunting with where we lived. It was shotgun only.
That's an awesome story, and I, without trying to sound sentimental or creating any sort of narrative around current generations, I really hope that stories like that are still possible, right? Like, I can't say back. I mean, I'm in my late 30s. Hard to say like back in the day, former generations, things like that. But I had similar, right? Like I was the little boy with a BB gun and a mountain bike, and the world was my oyster.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think about those days so fondly, and also the knowing what I know now, illegal wildlife violations as a 9-year-old. Without necessarily knowing what seasons or even what game species are. I remember my brother and I, we lived in a pretty rural area of South Carolina during this particular time, and we had lots of turkey vultures around and all the time. And so we would play dead on the trampoline until we got turkey vultures like circling us, and we would have stashed our BB guns underneath the trampoline, and then we'd be like 1, 2, 3, go, and we'd roll over and grab our BB guns and lay on our back and hit absolutely nothing, right? It was like an impossibility to hit this bird flying 80 feet above us in circles. We could barely hit a Coke can, but we would spend all day, an entire day doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are super fun stories. Hey folks, Jay here. Just taking a short break from the show to let you know about something that I am really excited about. My first few times chasing turkeys, I wasn't learning. I was just repeating the same mistakes, but just in different woods. Hearing birds, getting close, and then blowing it without really knowing why. That can be a really frustrating part about turkey hunting. It's not always obvious what you're doing wrong. As you know, we are proudly partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. Their hunter education course is designed to help you learn how to safely get out into the woods as a hunter with confidence. But they've also just started developing courses to help you learn more about hunting specific species. I had the honor to help them to develop their newest course called Turkey Hunting Fundamentals. This online course is designed to help bring clarity to turkey hunting, how birds move, how to set up on them, when to push, when to sit tight. All that stuff can actually really change outcomes. So if you're new or if you're just tired of guessing, I promise you it's worth your time. If you want to check it out, go to certifiedhunter.com/courses to get started. All right, let's jump back into the show.
That sparked something. I think it is still possible. And stories like that, Jay, really what it is that sense of wonder and using your imagination. And I feel, we look around us, there's so many distractions. I mean, we've got cell phones and technology and competing interests and heavily scheduled, days and whatnot. But those periods of time where you can actually use your imagination and conjure up just, adventures and all that kind of stuff, I think is still very, very precious. And there's still hope out there. I think that there are, adults and kids need that. But I think there's certainly space for that in people's lives. And I think that's part of the big driver, I think, for people like you or I that are in this kind of world is that we see how important this is to us, and we just want to share that with other people. We want others to experience that because it's brought so much value to our lives. It's really hit. When I said that moment in that canoe changed my life forever, it really did. I went into I had a couple of jobs and stuff, and then I went to corporate America at the ripe old age of 14. And I was in a machine shop, working every day after school and right through the summers and all that. And that turned into a 20-year career. And my first retirement after 20 years, I was 34. It's like, I feel like I was way beyond my years, the stress and all that of running a production crew for machine shop. But I was still connected to the outdoors. I was raising my family. We had a nice little farm in New Hampshire, and still very, very connected to hunting and fishing, but my time was very limited. And that's where I had an about face and kind of took a hard right, so to speak, and changed the trajectory of my family's life. And it's brought me back to the outdoors again. So yeah, there's hope out there, Jay. We can't give up. I love the buzzard story, though. That's great. That's something I would do. I never thought of that, but I'm looking back now. I'm like, I missed my opportunity because I could see that playing out.
Yeah, my family and I live in a very much a neighborhood now, suburban America, and I am encouraged. Like I think every kid for Christmas one year all got these like electric little dirt bikes
Yep.
things, and there is a straight like bike gang that patrols my neighborhood now of these kids, and I'm all for it because those kids are out, they're exploring, they're doing their thing, and I think that's exciting. So you've been hunting a long time, right? The majority of your life. Is that fair
Yeah.
to say?
Yeah, I would say
So,
40 plus years.
so we talk a lot on this show about perspectives in hunting. I think that's one of the great things I love to have the show for, because it allows people to share their perspectives on what they perceive about hunting, what motivates them to hunt, etc. So what does a quote unquote good hunt mean to you now than compared to 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is an evolution. I think everybody's path is a little different. And I think back to where I was, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and I think there's also periods in your life, whether, you're rearing your family or you've got, a new job and work constraints. It was always new adventures for me, the planning, the preparation, getting all my gear laid out and stuff like that. And, in my earlier years, I wouldn't say obsessed, but I was more focused on, chasing that big whitetail and trying to put some antlers on the ground and whatnot. I never felt unsuccessful. I mean, every hunt was a success in itself, but there's a little bit more drive, I think, to actually go out and kill a deer or, whatever I was um, going after. And then I think, when you start getting your kids involved and you start to see it through their lens, you really just want to have an enjoyable experience and have have fun so that they want to continue to do this. But then you start to realize that you don't necessarily need to be the one behind the scope or behind the trigger to enjoy that hunt fully, and you can really get more out of that by being a mentor or taking somebody out. And I had the luxury of being a Maine guide. I was taking out strangers, right, members of the public. They would hire me to take them on a bear hunt or a deer hunt or a moose hunt. And I knew that they were putting a lot of trust in me, and I wanted to give them the hunt that I would have wanted from an outfitter. And I took care of all the little details. We didn't run a fancy shop. I mean, we were the type of hunting outfit that you could afford. We worked hard for the blue collar family to get somebody out there for a week on a moose hunt or whatnot. Um, but where I'm going with that is I feel like I was enjoying the hunt as more of a guide or a spectator, not necessarily being the one behind the trigger. Now, I think with hunting, there's also a lot of this ebb and flow because more recently I've been hunting out west for the last couple of years. I was very fortunate in getting a mule deer tag from Montana. So I'm hunting out of state in a unfamiliar territory on a game species I didn't know a lot about, and it was like learning all over. And I was
Sure.
successful. I did shoot a decent buck. Have my two sons with me, and then last year same location, but we actually went after antelope, and my son and I both got our first antelope. And I'm an antelope hunter now, so now I've got a new I guess, favorite type of hunting. But I'm back in the game, as that the excitement of something brand new. So I think it's always changing, it's evolving. And then every new person you bring out too, there's always different variables with that person.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it's a continuum, and I think that's what's kept me in this. Um, as long as I've been hunting. I can't remember a time that I didn't hunt, any particular year. There's years I didn't have as much time, but um, it's always a priority in my life. Always has been.
Yeah. I think the I'm glad that you brought guiding into the conversation because it I've never been a hunting guide, nor am I really qualified to be a hunting guide, but I have been an outdoor instructor, on the outdoor education side and the other, backpacking, canoeing, kayaking world for years. I've had a whole career in it before I ended up in the hunter ed side, and finding joy in sharing natural spaces with people and leading them through something that otherwise they would have never really been able to do on their own and have these experiences and stand on those mountaintops that they would have never been able to stand on, otherwise. And to find that sort of help them find that personal resolve to keep going in tough spots and all of those things. I could get real reminiscent and honestly teary eyed on some of those things because, it as a guide, oftentimes those are, I mean, you like doing, but at the end of the day, it's your job, right? I mean, but you love doing it, but that's a single snapshot as a part of your job or your career. But for a lot of people, right, that you're helping and guiding, this is it's a bookmark moment, in their life, and it's so cool to be a part of that. And like you, I really got started in fishing when I was younger. I didn't grow up hunting, and so um, I, this relates back to guiding. I had like the not the guide curse a little bit, right? I got into fly fishing when I was young, and my first time I ever held a fly rod was on a guided fly fishing trip, right? And of course, he's tying flies on, he's saying land it right there,
Right.
and all those things. And man, we were just ripping lips all day,
Right.
just catching these beautiful
When
brown
he's
trout.
young.
And because, I had this guide with me who very much knew what he was doing. And I came away thinking, I'm a fly fisherman now. And then I spent the next years not catching a thing, to kind of build up that level of knowledge to be able to to be on some fish.
Yeah, sometimes you can make it look easy. I always say it's better to be lucky than good. Um, in my guiding career, I've had a lot of times where I pulled a rabbit out of my hat, and the client thought I was, you know, the guru of whatever that activity was, and I'm thinking deep down, I'm like, wow, we just got lucky. We got really lucky. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I think too, like what you were just saying with your outdoor leadership stuff. Um, I also think it reminds you to point out the little things because the little things make the greater whole. You think about a hunting situation, shooting a big buck. Everybody wants to have that brag and drag,
Hmm.
the iconic photo. But if that's how you're telling the story, you're missing so many little pieces. And it's pointing out things along the way, whether it's sign or something completely irrelevant, like the view. Stop and look at the sunrise or the sunset, or something that's just really interesting. As a guide or a leader or mentor, pointing out those little key things really does create the full package. And I was on a guided elk hunt in Montana, 2008, and I remember the guide. We're breaking trail up in Mount Edith, up in the wilderness, and all on horseback, heavy, deep snow. We get harsh conditions. And at one point, the guide told us to get off the horses and just kind of walk off trail for a second. And I thought, like my first thought was that maybe there's some sign over there or whatever. And what it was he walked us out to the edge of this ledge just to show us the view. Now we were only 75 yards from that on the trail. We would have never even knew that it existed. And he wanted to show us that this is where some of the mountain goats would actually come out on the rocks and navigate through the crags and the rocks and whatnot. He could have easily just continued down the trail and chasing elk and whatnot, but took the time to show us some things that we wouldn't have seen. And when I left there, I felt so much more a part of that hunt. So we got to remind ourselves, you
Yeah.
know,
And that kind of stuff is so important, particularly for new and novice hunters, right?
yeah,
It, it allows hunting to not just be this pursuit, but allows you to more connect with the landscape, right? I mean, because you mentioned the folks that are just there for the big buck and to put big antlers on the ground and things like that, right? Like I I don't know. I can only speak from my experience. I feel like if that was my perspective on things, then my tenure in hunting would be quite short, right? Because those moments are far and few in between, right? And most of the time I go hunting, it's taking my rifle on a nice walk in the woods, but that is, I mean, I wouldn't say equally, but it's still very enjoyable because there is a connectedness to all the things, both the wildlife wilderness side and my phone wouldn't ring right now. If someone called me, all of those things, right? To put that kind of stuff in a box and close it for just a brief time. And so those are things that add up to, from my perspective, that add up to be sort of the rich context
yeah.
of why hunt, why stay with hunting, why be an advocate, right, for wildlife and wild spaces. So absolutely.
Right. I think also selling that to the potential mentors. I think if somebody's never mentored somebody, I think, a lot of us have taken out our spouses, our family, our kids, grandkids. But if we could just normalize people to take out the next door neighbor that might be a single mom raising a child that wouldn't have the opportunity, or a single dad, or a coworker, an adult that has never had an opportunity to go hunting or target shooting. If if we could get more people to recognize um, some of these things we're talking about in the value that it will bring to their lives by getting somebody else started. Because again, it's almost like a rebirth. Like you get that new person out there, and next thing you know, you're going to the range or you're planning for turkey season,
Mm-hmm.
and that person's sending you videos from their game camera, and you you've shared your passion, but you're also forging the path forward for them. And there's so many benefits to that mentor or the hunter. Um,
Hmm.
so it's really important. My kids are grown now, and I've got some grandkids, and I look forward to every day I can get out in the field with them, as well as my adult grown children. But now I've got some more free time to take other people out, and I am looking for those folks that are in the wings that maybe have never done this before. We've done some projects here within the department um, that are kind of aligned with those goals and introducing the next generation. One of the things, Jay, when we started off and talked about how I got started, and somebody just asked me this question the other day, and I had to really think about it. And I can't remember how it was phrased, whether it was, what does hunting mean to you, or how do you identify? And really, where I started was I truly believe it's an instinct. It's inside of many of us that hunting is an instinct. It's deep rooted in our being, and it doesn't always come to the surface for folks because they may not have the catalyst or the opportunity to experience it. But I feel like I wouldn't be whole if I wasn't participating. And what we haven't talked about is just putting wild game meat on your table and being connected to the food source in the ecosystem. I mean, we're mammals. That's where we are, you know, aligned as we eat plants and animals, and we're not very adept, as far as some of the other adaptations that other predators have. So our path in hunting has been different, but I truly do believe it was an integral part of my being well before I had the opportunity for it to surface. And I've had people ask me the question, like, would you ever stop hunting, or what if you couldn't hunt? And I feel like it would be a huge deficit in my life, and um, a major negative impact, I think, on my well-being overall. Just looking forward to it, the planning, and in some
Yeah,
years I don't get out nearly as much. I might just get my time in the tree stand and deer season in a few days in the turkey woods. It's kind of funny, and you probably find the same thing. In the people that are in these arenas in hunter education and things like that, it's kind of the old adage, like the carpenter's house is never finished.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, absolutely.
there's not enough time sometimes for
Hmm.
me to actually do the things that I love to do because I'm out there, supporting the hunter education programs or other things, but I'm getting my fix in other ways. But those competing interests are totally fine with me because I'm still part of the community. So
Sure. Yeah. No, I 100%. I mean, I spend every day, all day talking about or thinking about educating novice hunters. Like
yep,
that's what I do for a living.
yep,
And it's why I do this. I mean, there's a reason why I do it because I feel strongly about quality education and helping novice hunters to discover the learning they need to go out and feel confident and actually become like contributing members of this community, right? And contributing can be a lot of different ways, whether that be helping with wildlife projects or mentoring new hunters or buying a license is contributing, right? And so, but yeah, you don't always get the time to be out yourself. We just recorded. I was a part of recording a lot of hunting videos for an educational course, and that was where I spent my season. My deer, we're doing deer content, so I spent most of my deer season doing that, and I spent a ton of time in the woods, but not too much time
yeah.
hunting deer.
The cameras and the microphones and all the
Not quite the same, right? Like, oh, could you step back and say that again?
right.
Not a very authentic hunting experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we did a little bit of filming this last fall, and it'll actually be coming out this summer. But yeah, it's kind of the same vein, like on a Saturday right in the middle of deer season, and get my fix. But we were shooting with the camera more so than anything. But
Yeah,
good too,
absolutely.
though.
Yeah,
The whole premise of this whole production was about telling this story about mentorship, and you'll get to see it here in a couple of months. But um, that that project really gave me a chance to do some deep reflection in looking back in my path, and as well as a new hunter that I was working with, and her family and her motivations, which are very different. And it was a very exciting project, but dug into the corners a little bit. And at the end of it, um, it just gave me a renewed hope for the future. And I think that there's a lot of good stuff going on out there. There really is. But I think the commercialization of things and people fall into the trap. With it can be anything. It can be hunting, fishing, but they fall into some of the traps with social media and influencing and things like that
Mhm.
that aren't always positive. A lot of great stuff out there, but some of it
There
gets
is.
yeah.
Yeah. I do feel like, though, that within the industry of hunting, and particularly the folks within our industry that like you and I, like, we're concerned with helping novice hunters, um there's lots of research and theories and things that go into the R3 ecosphere, like that. I do feel like there's been a shift, and this is just a personal perception, over the last couple years, that it's almost a departure from some of the logistics. While those logistics are still important, right? Like having programs, things like that, um, but also focusing on more on the idea of helping people to find community in hunting, helping people to find their belongingness in the hunting community. And I think really starting to see that more reflective in some of the programs that are being offered by state agencies, by NGOs, et cetera. I'm extremely excited about that, because that at the end of the day, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, like the idea of belonging, feeling like you are belonging to a community in some way or the other, right? Is really is what is that's the glue that
Yes.
holds people in, because
Yeah.
it's easy to recruit a hunter to come and maybe try some turkey hunting, and then it'll come out for a deer season or two. But the hard part is getting the stick, the glue in place, where folks will remain and continue on as hunters. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really big deal.
It is. They might if it's brand new, you don't know what you don't know, so you have an experience and get you excited and you start thinking about, um, continuing on, hopefully, and it's maybe they start wearing camo and they start to get some more gear and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
really, it's the networking and the connection, um, in the community that is going to pave the way for future involvement. Because if you feel like you're siloed or you don't have people that you can connect with, and let's face it, a lot of new hunters don't have the peers in their current circles, um, that may be as supportive or really, they may not be against it, but they may just not be for that. So when you start talking about, what we're going to be doing on the weekend, if you don't have other peers in your group, um, the opportunities might be very, very different. But I think there's a lot of great organizations, and culture out there that people can find something that works for them. I just came back from the National Wild Turkey Federation convention down in Nashville, and boy, what a head spinner! You're just surrounded by everything turkey hunting, and you saw. Um, I guess you could imagine what you would see for the typical person walking through the show, but you saw families, you saw kids, you saw, grandparents and friends, and everybody was just there celebrating hunting, and just a great feel, and that happens all over the country in a lot of different communities with different shows or the banquets and things like that. I think that's another important thing is with a mentor is just think beyond the field. Think beyond the preparation and that kind of thing is what else can you do to include them? Maybe you belong to a rod and gun club. Invite them to come down and become a member and give them a place that they can shoot. Maybe they'll meet other people in those circles.
Hmm.
And I really, if I look back, that's really what kind of solidified it for me was not that I just feel like I was a hunter now, but I started to see other people like me. And most of them were older than me because I think back to my high school, I could count on one hand, out of 120 kids in my class, I don't think there was more than two or three that I knew that actively hunted. And looking back, it was a very low percentage. Um, so finding those other pieces to complete the puzzle is important. I would like we said, it's the glue that keeps them involved. One of our programs we do, so we've had the Becoming Outdoor outdoorswoman program as a state program for years. And about 2 or 3 years ago, we pivoted to Maine Outdoor Skills. And basically, what we were doing is we're taking the same program model but broadening it. And we've seen that type of program work really successfully because you've got a lot of folks come from all walks of life to join in a gateway experience. And it might be there's lots of different offerings, it's like shotgun range and fly fishing and things like that. So you get a lot of different interests, but you start building that community and you start to see the participants making connections, at a meal or around the campfire. And I can look out the door right now and identify dozens and dozens of participants that are now actively out there with people they met at those types of programs. And, there is a lot of work that goes on to put them on and get some key partnerships, but the the benefit and the value, it's very visible. And then there's also a lot of unknowns. Like we don't know how many people leave there and we don't see what they're doing, but unless you're looking through social media and all that stuff, and then you start to see like, hey, I remember that person. They, did this introduction to turkey hunting workshop, and now they're out there on a big game hunt somewhere. So yeah, the networking and social support is really, really critical, a big part of
For
it.
sure. For sure. So I want to change gears. Unfortunately, I don't have some awesome segue to hit you with here, but,
That's around.
I'd love to talk about moose hunting a little bit. Mostly this is my own curiosity. I've never hunted moose. And I've got a bit of a fascination with the idea
Yeah.
of hunting moose. I have put in for a Maine moose tag back when I
Right.
lived in
So look
Pennsylvania,
at your name.
I might, that was a while ago, but, so for someone who's never experienced it, like myself, what makes uh, moose hunting in Maine unique? What's unique about it?
Jay, when you asked me to do this podcast, I thought we were going to be on for like an hour and a half, but I guess we're going to be on for about 4.5.
It's all right.
What makes Maine moose hunting unique? I will say there's a lot of things that I think would make it a unique hunt. Um, to kind of highlight, so Maine boasts the largest huntable population of moose in the lower 48. We have a robust population, and a lot of it comes down to our climate and the way that our forests are managed. And the northern part of the state, we've got what's called the North Maine Woods, which is private land holdings that we call it paper company. So it's basically, a large tree farm, and it's a lot of different ownership, but it's about 3.5 million acres of wildlands, and you pay a simple gate fee to get in. But that's about 2/3 of our hunting grounds for moose. And I think moose, just in general in Maine, it's such an iconic species. It's a very interesting, you know, um, large game species. People come from all over the world to come here and hopefully see one.
Yeah.
But I think the opportunity to hunt moose um, is kind of a rare occurrence. And, the end result, you're going to spend a full week immersed in some of the most beautiful scenery in a state like Maine, and having to match your wits with potentially really large bull or a cow that's going to put 400 pounds of meat in your freezer. And I think having that opportunity close to home is really what makes moose hunting in Maine such an amazing opportunity. And we've been really looking at from a department standpoint and management standpoint, we're really looking at the culture and the motivators of our moose hunters. And like everything, we're trying to always make sure that we're um, providing the best experience that we can and that people are really respecting the resource. So we're trying to do a lot more on education to fully prepare moose hunters, because it's a big undertaking. If you've never packed out a big game animal, and you go in and put in for a tag and you get a tag, you got some homework to do. Um, so I don't know if I summed it up there, but I think the beauty in the backdrop, the accessibility to a lot of folks, and the ability to hunt for the biggest North American
Hmm.
mammal species is just is is top tier for a lot of folks. We've got a lottery system, so we draw about 4,000 tags every year, and it can be a difficult tag to draw, but I put in tags out in the western states, and it's a lottery. It doesn't mean it's a guarantee. So, but when you do get a tag, it's a big deal. And the other big takeaway is that traditionally it's a family hunt. It really is the type of a hunt where you think back to our, like we just talked about, traditions and heritage. We see a lot of families when they get that moose tag, the planning starts right there, and everybody's involved. You're planning out your menu and where you're going to camp or your lodging and whatnot. There's a lot of work, but we see a lot of families um, participating in our moose hunts. So that's another, you know, kind of a cool aspect of that type of a hunt. So, do you put in this year?
No, no, I haven't put in probably, I don't know, 7, 8 years. It's been a while.
Can't stop,
I
Jay.
should
Once you
though.
put
I
in, you
should.
don't want to lose your bonus points.
I know, I know, I know. Well, at the time I was living in Pennsylvania, and now I'm in South Carolina, but I should start putting in again for sure. Um, that'd be super fun. But um, I lived, I lived in Vermont, New Hampshire area for a while, and there's those areas that just look moosey.
Yeah,
Those bogs, that you see on the side of the road.
the places that you slow
I
down at
could
night
not
and hunt
drive by
together.
one without trying to, uh-huh, yeah, always looking for a moose there. And never saw one. And then not too long ago, I was in Idaho with some coworkers, and we had a little bit of downtime. So we drove through a nature park, and someone was like not like just a wildlife park. And someone was like, "We're going to see a moose today," and I was like, "No chance." And sure enough, we were driving through, and there was a moose standing right there in the woods. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's an awesome experience. We see a lot of folks behind the camera that want to see moose in their natural habitat. A lot of people come up here to vacation, and I think for many, many years it was really common to see them roadside, and to a fault. I mean, probably more than we wanted to. They were seeing, car collisions and certain things like that. And but after we started hunting them, I think we're now 40 plus years with an open season. You've got to look a little harder in different areas, but there's still plenty of moose. And every single time it takes your breath away. I don't care if you've seen them, hundreds of, yeah, it's just an awe-inspiring animal. I'm very fortunate. I live in the western mountains of Maine, and my property abuts some national forest as well as some paper company. And we've had moose right in the yard and coming right down through the valley, and there's quite a decent population where I'm at in Zone 12, but it never gets old. And then the other thing is, for guiding standpoint, I knew how hard it was to get that tag. So like if I had a client that would hire me to take them on a moose hunt, my outfit, we would just do a 1 week hunt with one client. So I wasn't trying to be successful, get a moose in the truck, and then go to the next person. They got me for the week. So if we were successful earlier in the week, we bird hunt or fish or do some small game hunting and things like that.
Yeah, I mean the thought of hunting moose in Maine sounds amazing. But could you kind of walk us through? I know this is a big question. What a typical moose hunt might look like for someone coming in and going after it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, if you know me and my storytelling, I always start at the beginning. So if you can envision middle of June, we have a Moose Lottery Festival, which is a big deal in the state. A lot of states, when they draw tags, they pretty much put them up on their website or whatnot. And we typically have our drawing. It's obviously generated on the computer, but we do a live drawing, um, and it's place-based, so it happens all over the state. And typically, different towns or communities will put together some kind of a festival type atmosphere. And if you can imagine a couple thousand people showing up and sitting there waiting for their name to be read, That's the beginning. So if you're lucky enough to get your name drawn, or you find out that night that you got your tag, and you immediately start planning. You start planning your lodging. You start trying to secure your butcher, all those logistics, and that's going to take you a couple of weeks to get all of your hunting plans together. And you really do have to do your homework to make sure that you've got a cabin rented or a guide reserved and things like that, because it gets pretty competitive and things fill up quick. And then as you get into middle of the summer, you're gonna be practicing with your firearm, your bow or crossbow, and getting prepared. It's all part of the process, right? But then here we are. We're heading up to the North Country for our moose hunt, and these places are remote. Um, you've got to make sure you're planning for all the what ifs and extra tires and air compressors and camping equipment and all that sort of stuff. But so let's say here, it's opening day. As a guide, I always knew how hard it was to get that tag, and I would make sure that I was going to provide a hunt that I would like to be on. So the first day of your hunt, up early, out the door well before daybreak, strong cup of coffee, and typically you've got your first, second, and third options of where you want to be, because in moose hunting you don't know where people are going to be. A lot of folks, this is their first hunt, so it's not like deer hunting where you might be a little bit more predictable about where people's tree stands are or things like that. Moose hunting, you may not know that somebody else has a certain area kind of envisioned for their first hunt. So just long, dusty dirt roads, you get into position and you find a spot where you're going to start your hunt. And I'll sit in the tailgate in the pitch black for an hour, just drinking my coffee and just listening to the woods waking up. And what I'm listening for is, a bull grunting or breaking brush off in the distance, or a cow, wailing, that sort of stuff. It might just be really quiet, but I'm trying to key in on, do I hear any moose type sounds? And then from there, it's pretty much boots on the ground. We'll cover a lot of old secondary logging roads, and I like to hunt smarter than harder to start. And we try to cover grounds that are like trails or woods roads that we can navigate on foot. But if we needed to get a four wheeler or a vehicle in, we could. And then as the hunt goes on, we get further and further in. And I really can't stress enough, like, really should get some mud on the boots and be sweating. It should be, in the woods where the moose are, and we're trying to get away from like the roadside hunters and that sort of stuff, which was pretty commonplace for a while. But in any moose situation, um, you're always going to be thinking about, how are you going to get an animal out and back to a vehicle, and be playing that in your head. Like, do you have the equipment and the means to pack it out? But so flash back to that first morning, it can happen really quickly. I've had moose hunts where within an hour of daybreak, we found a moose that we were pretty happy with. And
Wow.
there's times where you've hunted for 6 days straight, and you go home with a tag in your pocket, and you felt like you've done everything right. So it really does run the gamut. Weather plays a factor into that. Luck plays a big factor into that. Prior scouting, it really needs to be closer to the season, because if you're out there in July or August and you're scouting, you'll find moose probably in those same areas, but they're not doing the same things. They're moving different food sources, and their breeding cycles will be kicking in and driving a lot of their attention. So, um, but then I'll tell you, you get that interaction with a bull, you start calling, and now you're communicating with this animal. It's like turkey hunting, when that gobbler comes off the roost, it's on,
Hmm.
and your heart's beating, and trying to get something to present itself. And that's where we really try to stress to everybody, whether we guide them or mentor them, is shot placement is going to be really important. You get a big target, but you can't underestimate things like distance, or you know brush, or that sort of stuff. Shot placement is going to be key. But if you're successful in harvesting a moose, as soon as that moose hits the ground, the work begins. Like, you know, there's going to be a huge sense of relief, fist pumps and high fives and all that. And then when you walk up on that moose and you get a look at the size of the animal, um, and if it's a big bull, you kind of caught up in that moment, and then you realize the work begins, and that's really where you're going to earn your stripes. Even
Yeah.
field dressing a moose, it's not like field dressing a deer.
Oh, yeah.
You're you're all in, and sometimes I mean that figuratively. You're in, you're up to your neck, and so yeah, and then I think professionally too, we're really trying to help educate folks to go into a moose hunt with clear expectations on what to anticipate and how to plan, and not to be afraid of quartering up their moose. It's really not that daunting of a task, and those are the hunts though. You work hard, and it means so much to you. Like you get back to the truck tired and covered in sweat and blood and scratches from the blackberry bushes and all that. But boy, that ride back home to camp, it's magical, and get to replay it over and over again. And I'll tell you, I've had hunts too that have gone 6 days, and we drove home with a tag in our pocket, and it's a long, quiet ride home. But you reflect on that, and it was still an amazing experience. And it's no guarantees. It's a hunt, and you go into it with the mindset too that you got 6 one-day hunts, because that's what you got. You got 1 week. This
Hmm.
season you're allotted 1 week. And it's either the October season or September season, and there's a couple of different seasons, within each month, but um, you're allotted 6 days. So
Wow.
yeah,
So I know it's, getting a tag is pretty competitive. A lot of folks out there want to hunt moose in Maine. When you're out there, are you bumping into a lot of other hunters?
yeah,
Is that pretty common?
there's definitely some areas that I'll see more traffic than others. And for me, it doesn't bother me at all. Actually, I kind of like it because it's everybody's there for the same reason. We got some bird hunters mixed in there. There'll be some bird hunters riding around with some bird dogs in the back, and maybe a couple of our late season bear hunters. But I'm surrounded by people that are trying to do the same thing I'm doing, so it doesn't really bother me. I mean, I guess there's times when I've been guiding that my spot, like my honey hole, so to speak, um, might have somebody there before I got there. And I have to just remind myself and check my ego at the door and say, they got here before I did. And I'm going to do the right thing, and I'm going to do what I would want them to do. And I'm going to leave them alone, let them hunt through, and I'll maybe come back and try again another day. But there's also some areas in the state that you'll never see another moose hunter. And I've been in zones
Yeah.
where I never bumped into another moose hunter. And I think that's another testament to getting off the beaten path and finding those nooks and crannies that you can really get in, and whether it's on foot or just kind of map it out. So yeah, there's a shift too. I think the roads are going to be busy, good, bad, or indifferent, and people still tend to take the path of the least resistance, and they'll spend a lot of time in the truck. And I'm not shaming that. Everybody hunts different, and everybody has different abilities. And that's the other thing too, is we have to remind ourselves that not everybody has the physical ability to go hiking 8 miles, into the middle of nowhere. And um, so I respect, all types of hunting, but I think if people are just going into it primarily running roads, you're probably setting yourself up for a bit of disappointment.
Yeah,
And you will see more competitiveness. You'll see more traffic and whatnot. And boy,
for
those
sure.
those North Main roads, um, in the summer. Have you ever been up to the North Main woods, Jay?
I don't think so. No, I've spent time in Maine, but
No.
I don't think I've been up there.
I'm sure you've been on plenty of dirt roads in your day, but
Yeah,
the roads they're pretty much clay and shale.
yeah,
And when it's dry, it is hard to see in the cloud from the vehicle that just passed you. And it's also an open and active logging operation year round. So there's a lot of logging trucks. But so when it's dry, it's tough because the visibility. I mean, you're breathing this stuff in, but as soon as you get a little bit of rain, it turns the opposite and it's slick because it's clay. So and it's part of the experience. I think of all the moose hunts I've been on and the blown tires and the sides of the road with a chunk of shale sticking out of your firewall. I had one hunt a couple of years ago. This guy had put in for I think we put in for 19 years. And so I see that as a huge responsibility. Like I got to give this guy a good experience. So we're everything I just told you, we're all excited. It's opening morning. We're out there early when I get to our honey hole, and we call this the magic mile. We've killed 6 or 7 bulls within a mile on this one stretch of secondary winter roads. So that's where we're headed. And I've pumped him all up about this place. And we went there, scouted on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Lots of signs, saw lots of moose. So he's jacked. And we go roll out of camp, and I can see in the skyline, I can see because it's pitch black up there. There's no like light pollution, and I can see the sky is all lit up. And it took me a minute to figure it out, but it was the graders, these giant road graders at 4 in the morning. They're grading and scraping the surface, and they do this periodically. But here it is, like the opening day of moose season up in zone 1, and I'm thinking, I can't believe they're grading the road this morning. So we come around the corner, and now I'm on the road that they just passed by with the blade, and that shale stands up like glass. It's like jagged, rocks. And so I'm driving a brand new Tacoma, and I did not have great tires. I had good tires. I did not have great tires on it, and I made a mistake. So we're driving to the last 3 miles to our honey hole, and lo and behold, I hit a piece of shale and blew a hole through the sidewall. And so I pull over to the side of the road, and of course it's been raining, so I'm laying in the mud trying to get the tire off of this vehicle, and it was frozen. Got the lug nuts off, got all the equipment, had everything with me, but I got the truck jacked up, and I could not get the rim to free up from the hub. It was just welded on there. So I ended up having to take my trailer hitch off and kind of give it a good whack from the inside. Finally get the tire swapped on the spare, and we got to our first spot 15 minutes before daybreak, and I was sweating because we had so much time on the front end planning this hunt. And but we did not see anything the first day, and we did shoot a really nice bull on Wednesday. But just being prepared for those experiences. But I know here I am telling you that story, and that was like honestly the highlight of the whole week was blowing the tire. It was like everything was going wrong, and I had to really dig deep to figure out how do I put the train back on the tracks, because this guy's paying me money to take him out there. And yeah, it was a good hunt. It was a good hunt. And then the bull that he shot, we were finding everything was pretty call shy. Things weren't responding, and we had a few close encounters, but nothing was really playing out. And we were driving down the road towards camp, and actually earlier in the week I'd seen the signpost rub right along the side of the road. And earlier in the week I told Steve, I said, "You're going to kill that bull." I said, "You look at that signpost rub." I said, "You're going to kill that bull." So by Wednesday, we kind of came back to camp for lunch, and we were going back out and watching the weather and the wind. And I came back to that signpost, and I said, "Let's go in and find this bull and get him up out of his bed." It's midday. Things are typically going to be bedded down. So he's all excited, and so we gear up, and it was him and my son was with me. And we start heading in, and then the wind shifted, and it was right at our backs. And we're about a quarter of a mile in. And I'm like, turn around, we'll head right back to the truck. Because I knew on the map, if we had hiked back out, came in from the opposite side, we would keep the wind in our face. And I definitely contemplated maybe pushing on. But anyway, so long story short, we go back to the truck, made a quick loop around, came in with the wind in our face. And so we're working our way through kind of the middle between these two logging roads. And I told him, I said, think about it. Moose want to get away from people, get away from roads, and where they're gonna bed. They're gonna bed down in the thickest cover. And we started getting close to about the half mile mark between these two roads. And I'm in this big thicket of blackberries. And I turned around and took a photo of him, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking the last photo I'm gonna take of you before you kill a big bull." And he said, "Oh, I like the sound of that." So, and I've been calling pretty sparingly because we weren't getting any calls back. So I didn't really want to make things too alarmed. And we got to a spot, and like you said earlier, it just felt moosey. Like you just knew it's on. And so I belled out a cow call, and this big bull stands up broadside 60 yards, right in where I had envisioned him standing. And my client, Steve, he was probably maybe about 10 paces behind me, and he's looking in different directions. And I'm just standing there frozen, pointing. And he's looking at me and looking at my body language and my posture. And you see his head turn. And that was it. And kind of ushered him up to closer to me to get a shot. And that was one of my more memorable hunts because after the shot, um, we gave it a minute or two. When we walked up to the bull, his reaction was very emotional, and you tell how thankful he was.
Yeah.
He thanked the moose. But those 19 to 20 years of putting in all came together in that moment, and yeah, he got what he got what he had hoped for. So good guy. Yep, good hunt. Unfortunately, we actually just lost him a
Hmm.
couple of months ago to a tragic car accident. But
Wow.
yeah, but I don't know. Life is messy, and I look back at the memories we made together, and I've talked to his family, and but yeah, so it's a lot of experiences like that, throughout my personal and professional career hunting moose in Maine, and I know that everybody, in the state has similar stories to share. So, and I never get tired of listening to other stories. It's always one of my highlights. So we need to get you a tag there, Jay. We need to get you up here.
Yeah, man, I need to now. I'm fired up about it. I need to start putting in, and maybe in 19 years.
Yeah. Well,
I'll
bring your lucky rabbit's foot and find a penny heads up or whatever it takes.
yeah. So are you you're in the same boat. You're putting in for tags,
Yeah.
and you're getting them every 19 years. Is that how it works? Or
Yeah.
I mean,
So,
thereabouts, right? Or is it just all luck?
yeah, it is luck. I think I've been fortunate. Um, there's always people that'll be like, oh, the same people get tags year after year, or we hear the same family name, and my family has been very fortunate over the years, but I also it's my wife and I. I've got 4 kids, I've got grandkids, I've got significant others. My sons and daughters, husbands and wives and girlfriends, and everybody puts in. So there's probably in my circle probably 15 or 16 people that put in, and um, that I've been putting in for since I was probably 18. And I've drawn 2 tags. My wife has drawn 2 tags. Both of my sons have drawn a tag, and I think that's it for our group. So we still have quite a few that haven't ever drawn a tag. But if you see the last names popping up, a lot of folks that don't get drawn. But it is just a game of chance. Um, Another one of my favorite moose hunters, a good friend of mine now out of New York, he put in 24 years as a non-resident and got his first permit. And we hunted in Rangeley, had a great hunt there. And then in Maine, if you get a tag, you have to sit out for 3 years, and then you can reapply. In the very first year that he
Man,
reapplied, he got his second tag, and he called me. He's like, I can't believe this just happened.
no way.
2 tags in 4 years from a non-resident, which was kind of an anomaly. And we had another really challenging hunt on Jackman. That was a good hunt. It was hard. It was a last day situation, and we pulled it off. But I earned my stripes on that one. So, but you just gotta keep putting in. It's like any other state,
Yeah, yeah. I need to
the
get on
luck
my
would go
game
out.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I have a good friend in Pennsylvania. They have the elk tag, um, and I think his dad had been putting in for an elk tag for a long time, and then he started putting in his early 20s. He pulled an elk tag in Pennsylvania. So it
well,
his his dad was like, I've been putting in for years, years and
yeah.
years, and
This
but
this in
yeah,
Snatchers. We went to PA years ago, and is it um is it Benezet County or
yeah, there, yeah, in that region, yeah.
yeah? We went through there. It was kind of this time of the year actually with my kids, and um but we saw a lot of elk. I was actually shocked at how many elk we saw. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll have to stop putting in for that one.
They all kind of group up in that general vicinity.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you go to the elk country there in PA, you're going to see elk. I mean, they kind of group up, and I mean, particularly this time of year, and so you can drive through and just take an elk tour a little bit, you know. Um, Similar in North Carolina, not too far from me, you know, they reintroduced elk. It's been a long time ago there in like the Cataloochee Valley area, and they really didn't leave the valley for a long time. So you could go and drive and see elk in the valley. I mean, any any time of year you could, you know, drive out to Cataloochee Valley and check that out. But I think they are dispersing a good bit more now. Not too long ago, I was you know, we're not used to seeing elk in the southeast. It's just not
Right.
really, you know, a thing all that much, or it hasn't uh, you know, been that way for a long, long time. And I was in North Carolina, not too far outside of Asheville, and just driving down the road, and there was a bull elk standing on the side of the road, in someone's cornfield, and I was like, man, I'm not used to seeing that on the landscape, you know, here in the
Yeah.
southeast.
It gives you the illusion too that it's easy. It's an easy hunt. I think when you see animals like that in common areas, you think, oh, my hunt's going to be pretty easy. They're everywhere. But when it comes time to hunt, it changes a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Are you so to hunt moose in Maine? Are you required to have a Maine guide with you?
No, no. You can hunt on your own. I think Canadians that drew a tag as a non-resident have to hire a Maine guide because I think it's the same way for a non-resident going to Canada that you have to hire a guide for a moose hunt. I believe that's accurate.
Hmm.
But no, you can. There's plenty of folks that come up to do a self-guided hunt and and have success. I was actually working with one of my peers who they work for Nebraska Fish and Game. This gentleman, Chad, he drew a tag, and I was doing an introduction to moose hunting
Hmm.
webinar, essentially, like live in the field, just to try to give all of our permit winners just a bunch of intel and some calling tactics and things like that. And he was online, with this, and he messaged me after. He said, "Hey, I got a moose tag for zone. Can't remember what zone. It was zone 5." Um, but he had to swap his zone, and he asked me if I could help him with that process. And so I started to just build a relationship with him, and that turned out to helping him with the swap. But then as he came up here for his moose hunt with his daughter and family, I told him, I'm like, hey, if you need any, local knowledge or just intel or whatever, give me a shout. And it was interesting. Like during the week of his hunt, he called me 2 or 3 times to ask me, like, hey, this is what we're seeing, this is where we are, and what would you suggest? And it was kind of cool because I got to live his hunt vicariously through the conversations, through texting in his phone. And they had a tough go of it, but it was literally like textbook. The last day, the last 11 minutes of the hunt, him and his daughter shot a nice bull. And yeah, he called me as soon as he got back to cell service. He called me, and I saw the phone call. I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. And yeah, he was just stoked. He had a great hunt, made tons of memories with his daughter and family, and headed back to Nebraska with a really great Maine experience. So, and now I'm bugging him now to give me some intel on some Nebraska mule deer opportunities. So looking for some public land for my next trip out to the Midwest there at some point. So, but it's back to that community, Jay. It's like you just talked about. You meet people that you would never have met through these different channels, and you know that community is just so open and welcoming to share ideas and then share the success with each other. I think it's just really kind of inspiring.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'd love to kind of jump in even outside of the moose hunting side, um, and talk more about the the agency itself. So from your seat um, at Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife, what are you seeing with like new hunter participation right now?
It's actually pretty exciting. We're seeing, I think a lot of states really started to recognize kind of the shifting patterns and declines in some areas, and we've been increasing slightly, which is good, right? Statistically, you don't want to see these big spikes because there's always usually going to be a drop off. But we've seen a steady, like slight increase in participation. And I know some states are also just trying to, like, their mindset is just slow the bleed to just kind of lose slowly. And really, we're not seeing that. We're seeing increased participation. We're seeing a lot of new hunters coming in and what we consider non-traditional hunters. So I think there was always a lot of emphasis on youth. And you thought that, like, you get young kids interested in hunting or angling, and then they're going to be a lifelong, participant. And really, if you don't get the parent, you don't get the adult in that child's life, you may not get that child, for the long term. So we have a lot of adult onset hunters. Um, and then I think when, accessibility for online higher education platforms started to pop up right around 2018, 19, they were kind of surfacing. It was previous to my time here. I started in 21. And then COVID hit. I think COVID was a really important factor in the adoption of online opportunities. We started to see barriers being reduced for a lot of folks, and our student graduates from hunter education tripled, and I mean, and have remained higher than they were a decade ago. Now, it doesn't mean that every hunter education graduate is going to become a hunter, right? We know there's a percentage that don't ever make that next step, which is fine. So we're educating folks. But yeah, we're increasing overall, and we're seeing a lot of women afield. We have one of the highest women populations as far as new hunting participants. Um, I was talking to some folks that managed one of our courses. We were hovering around 34 to 36% female participation for hunter education graduates. So there's that's pretty exciting. So yeah, another area that we started to see a really um, progressive increase was trapping. And when I started in 2021, I recognized we had some barriers, we had some challenges with course availability. There was some things that were built in and kind of in the mechanics of getting the license to be a trapper. And I was definitely seeing growing interest. And we invested a lot of time and effort and money into our trapping program to really meet the public, where they're at to open the door there. And so that's been an area where we've seen a lot of growth. And the faces of our new trappers are very different. Their motivations are very different. It's not fur for monetary value as the primary motivator. Is a lot of intentionality on being more self-sufficient, self-reliant, food. There's lots of different um, other drivers, I guess. We did one of our surveys, and actually getting into trapping for profit was like 5 or 6. It was way down on the list. And I think 10, 15 years ago, that would have been primary. That would have been like the motivator was selling fur. But the other thing that we're seeing a growing interest in is archery hunting. And, we've had crossbow laws that were fairly restrictive. I think there was a nationwide trend for years where crossbow was seen as, I guess, a little bit of an advantage as far as archery. Some states recognize crossbow as firearms.
Hmm.
Um, there was restrictions on age or disability, things like that. And really, looking at where we are now, the general public wants to hunt with crossbow. A lot of states are looking to meet their management goals by providing more access and opportunity to harvest more deer. And we've taken a different approach. Here in Maine, we identified crossbow as archery equipment along with other states, and we've seen a big uptick in that. So we have a lot of folks that are, you know, they're going from being a firearms hunter to deer hunter, turkey hunter, now hunting with a bow or a crossbow. And it's opening up their season, gives them more time afield, more time with family. And yeah, certainly um, seeing some increases there. Um, and then one of the things we just did last fall, we created, if you think back to like when you did hunter education, you had to do the full course, meet the whole standard, in typically it was a traditional format, right? It was in person, and then we had online opportunities. And then for bow hunting or archery hunting, you have to do the same thing. You have to do the full online course or a full, 12-hour in-person course, that sort of thing. And if you look at both hunter ed and archery hunting standards and you lay them side by side on the table, and you could draw parallels to about 50% of the standards, the first aid and wilderness survival and wildlife conservation model, ethics, certain things like that. And we were seeing the numbers of our students in bow hunter safety just like almost non-existent. I think maybe 220 on average in any calendar year um, attending a class, and a lot of them were just going online. 2,500 students online with about 200 in person. So my instructors were starting to, they're like, well, you don't need us anymore. They're losing interest in leading the classes. They have 10 people sign up and 3 people would show up. And I was looking at an opportunity here, and I thought, what can we do to be more efficient, innovative, and honor those standards that have already been met? And I've been using this kind of analogy with a lot of folks to gain buy-in. But like when you're in high school, you might be doing algebra 1, algebra 2, geometry, but when you go to college, you're not repeating the same classes, just because repetition or doing it again is maybe beneficial. You're moving forward. You've checked those boxes. You've met that standard, and you're building on those skills. And that's really what we wanted to do, was create an archery addendum program that honored your hunter education certification
Mm-hmm.
and gave them everything else. And we ran a pilot program of 3 sessions last fall, and I was honestly blown away. We had 2 sessions. We had 30 people signed up for each one, and we had about 90% student um, ratio showing up, because that no-show rate's always a variable.
Sure.
And the second one we had, I think, open for 24 slots, and we had like 20 people showed up. So just in those 3 pilots, we certified, a third of what we would have done in a calendar year. And this year, we've really knocked the doors off of it. We've got, I think, at last check, I think we had 12 sessions open statewide, and they were all filling very, very nicely. We created that chatter and that buzz that this is a path forward. It's not going to take away from our online learners. We still see people going in that, direction. But what I think we're drawing the people that wouldn't have taken this online, but also didn't want to spend a full day or an evening and a full weekend day in the classroom, and they're doing it in about 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Anecdotally. So again, this is brand new. We started this last fall, but I've been polling people in the classroom, like, why haven't you taken it prior to right now? And many of them like, yeah, I'm not into the online, but I just can't cough up an entire weekend day. Or, I've been wanting to do this for a while, but now, I can feasibly do this in half a day. So, yeah, we're going to keep a close eye on this one, but I'm very, very excited about this. And I've got some other states that have been asking how it's going, and they're they're curious to see if, this might work in their state. So, yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see.
I think that's great. To find ways in which you can adapt education that will work better for the individual. I mean, we talk about the idea of the adult onset hunter, a lot, and think about giving an extra Saturday, with kids practices and the grass needs cutting, and so finding ways to meet those, to not discredit anyway the safety education that we have within our industry, right? But find ways to make it work better for people is a win-win for everyone involved.
It is, like what you just said, though, everybody involved, because the other part of that is our volunteers. Our volunteers have been the backbone for
Mm-hmm.
generations, decades. And I think in this community, um, I think, there's been a lot of folks that be like, oh, the retired white-haired gentleman that's been teaching this for decades or whatever. We can't forget that those are the folks that pioneered where we are right now.
Absolutely.
Nationwide, the safety trends are, I mean, we never envisioned the woods would be as safe as they are right now.
Yeah.
In Maine, we're seeing some of the safest seasons we've ever seen. So I look back at the value of those folks that were a lot younger, when they started and have been in the game teaching hunter ed for decades, they still bring tremendous value to these programs. But volunteerism as a whole, we've seen it with other community organizations. Um, Generationally, volunteerism is in decline. And if I can pitch a product like this or a program to a volunteer to say, you don't have to give up your whole Saturday, you can
Hmm.
do this in 4 hours, that's very appealing. So I think we're on to something, and I think that we're going to see more people stepping in. And I got to say, too, a big shout out to you, because I remember I pitched this idea last spring, and I'm like, hey, Jay, what do you think? And you and I were spitballing some ideas, and I had IHA involved and NBEF, and you were definitely helping me to grease the skids to make this happen, about that modular standard approach.
Hmm.
And we've done the same thing with other programs. We have a combined ATV snowmobile safety course. They were both two stand-up courses side by side, and
Hmm.
they shared about 60% of the same content. So we've actually done some real things there. So
Yeah, that's great.
cool.
That's really great. And for listeners that may not know, hunter education, has been around what 60 something years, right? And not in the way it is now, but in a more formalized setting. And going back to those volunteers, uh, every state in the U.S. uses or hunter ed is facilitated through volunteers. It's volunteer instructors who feel they're typically on the more experienced side of hunters, and they feel strongly about providing safety education to the next generation of hunters. And the I'm going to swing big. The millions of volunteer hours that have been donated in those 60 years, and to make hunter education is what it is, because hunter ed didn't come about because we thought this might be a good idea. Hunter ed came about because there were people getting hurt in hunting, and we were there was people having to take a step back. Okay, how do we address this trend? Because uh, it's not one, first and foremost, it's bad for people, right? If people getting hurt, that's not good. And secondly, from the big picture perspective, if people keep getting hurt in hunting, it's not gonna necessarily bode well for the future of hunting in North America, really. And so hunter education came about, and it really has. I mean, the online thing, yeah, is relatively new, where you can take your hunter ed course online in most states. Even then, a lot of those are accompanied by field experiences, which are ran by volunteers.
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, huge shout out to the volunteers. I mean, I when I get the opportunity to travel a good bit and go to like hunter ed meetings where the a state may bring in all their hunter ed volunteers for some training, for a dinner, and to get to see each other and all those things. And I get the opportunity to speak at those occasionally, and every time they always give out um, you know pins or gifts or some sort. But you have people there, they've been volunteering for 55 years, right? Just been around for a very long time and have just given so much to our
And
community.
it can feel like a thankless job sometimes.
Yeah.
They have given so much of their time, and I've been on the side where I'm the one handing out the certificates and the pins,
Yeah.
and and I never feel like we truly thank our volunteers enough. And a lot of them just do it for the love of what they're doing teaching. But I look at every single one of them, and just share with them that they have inspired the next generation. They have planted the seeds of safety in, and I'll speak for my state, in Maine, where we are today because of them, and because of all of these, you know, thousands of people that have donated so much time and gave their their um their time and efforts to the general public. So one thing that we're sharing right now in Maine is, hopefully this summer we're going to have a little bit more of a splash, but so hunter education was, it was elective, in the earlier years, and it became mandatory 40 years ago. So it's the 40th anniversary for the state of Maine to have mandatory hunter education. And in my role, I the data drives our decisions and our work, and I look at our ongoing hunter safety statistics back to like the 30s, and and I'm probably going to misquote here a little bit, but it's going to be close. But it was like 1957, 58, 59. Maine had about 17 fatalities and scores of injuries, in near misses. But 17 fatalities, and back then, kind of the culture was, it's hunting season, it happens, and I think the culture, the mindset, if it's brown, it's down, going to put food on the table, things like that. Um, it wasn't, it didn't raise eyebrows it like it should have, I guess. And um, fortunately, since I've been on in years before that, we haven't had a fatality in Maine. And I think 3 years ago, we had one minor incident. Now, this is from January 1 through December 30. We had one minor incident um, in its entirety resulting in an injury, and it was self-inflicted from a gentleman that had a revolver in his cold hands, slipped off the hammer, and he pinched the webbing of his thumb, and he had a powder burn on his finger, didn't shoot himself, but he actually called us and said, I think I'm supposed to report this because it happened while I was hunting. That was the only reportable accident. And we average around 4 to 6 a year, typically self-inflicted, minor stuff, sometimes two-party, two people go out together. We had an incident this year, somebody with a loaded firearm and a UTV, which is not legal, and
Mm-hmm.
safety was off, and you can only imagine what happened. A
Mm-hmm.
person struck in the leg. But when you look at the statistics in the hundreds of thousands of hours spent afield in all of the activities, turkey hunting, waterfowl, predator hunting, moose hunting, deer hunting, tree stands, the percentage is trivial. It is so low.
Mm-hmm.
But we're never going to rest until it's zero. But being the hunter ed admin for the state, I got to look people in the eye and tell them that, you know, I want my own granddaughter to be able to go into the Maine woods and be safe. If I ever feel that there's something that we're not doing to allow that to happen, then we'll make some changes. But a lot of this conversation started when we had to face into, is online hunter education effective? And I was new to the game, and I came in. I said, listen, I wasn't an early adopter right off the bat, but I said we've got to follow the data, and the data drives our work, and we need to lead with facts and not fear, because we can conjure up things that might happen, right? But we need to look at the data. And so every single accident or injury that we have that comes across my desk, the first thing I do, I go right to what was their mechanism of education. Now, there's some folks that have been grandfathered because of their age. They never were required to take hunter education. And they've probably been doing this for years and years and years. So maybe the laws of averages played in there. And I believe it's only 2 instances, maybe three, in the last 10 years have we had an accident or injury stemming from an online graduate. Most of them have consistently been in-person graduates. And it's not to cast a shadow on one or over the other, because when you look at the decades of in-person graduates, that's all we had. So there's more of them out there. But over the last 5 years that we've had online, we have not seen an uptick at all. We have not seen, and we've certified about 30,000 people in the state of Maine. So you would think that in the data, if it was a less safe opportunity for education or experience, we would see it, and we're not seeing that. But then the other thing is, it really motivates us. Yeah. So when we look at the statistics of the accident injury rate where we are now, we're actually really motivated having the resource of online as an opportunity. So we still have in-person traditional classes, which is fully in person, no homework, and then the home study, which is some kind of pre-work, whether it's the online or the student manual workbook, and then you show up for a 1 day class. But it's really motivated us to build out our next step programs, because we've got these new hunters now that whichever pathway they took to get certified, that's not the end of our relationship. And that's how it used to be. You get hunter ed and like, all right, well, don't shoot yourself and be careful out there. And we turn loose. And now we're providing next step programming, which builds on those skills, reinforces those same foundational, lessons and whatnot. But it takes it in a lot of different places. So we've got everything from introduction to turkey hunting, introduction to moose hunting, whitetail deer, waterfowl, upland bird. Then we've got shotgun specific programming, rifle specific, muzzleloader, and it's sort of like choose your own adventure. You can jump in and out of all these different workshops. They're all elective. They're typically 2.5 to 4 hours long. There's no cost. And we see a lot of folks building their skills there. And they're also building that community. We'll see people that come into these programs and meet other people with similar interests. So the next step programs for us have really been taking off. I think we led just under 100 individual next step programs last year.
Wow.
With probably about 15 different topics. And some of them we've just been proving out. The big ones we have introduction to deer hunting and introduction to turkey hunting are the two big ones that we've really put a lot of effort into. And we'll put I call it a battery. We'll put like a battery of programs out there all at one time and get it out there and advertise it, and folks can see what's closest to them. And a lot of them are seasonal, in a cycle. We'll try to load up late winter, early spring with turkey hunting, and then mid to late summer, early fall for deer and that sort of stuff. But a lot of them we also put together to try to see which ones were going to stick and which ones weren't. So we actually did one on hand loading your own ammunition.
Oh, really?
And the reason why we did this, we actually targeted a couple of our sportsman shows, but with the conversation around non-lead options, a lot of folks would come back to us and they're like, well, I can't find this caliber, or I'm not finding it readily available. And one of my guys says, I do a lot of hand loading. What if we were to pitch this just to demystify it? We're not going to have thousands of people, attend, but to help normalize that conversation. And yeah, it was really well attended. There's some folks that were, talking about that. And by taking that workshop, we're thinking, not only will they maybe be self-proficient in hand loading their own ammo if they can't find something, but they can also help others within their circles. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we're not afraid of making some mistakes and trying some things and seeing what's going to work and then modify it.
That's cool. So if listeners in Maine, if they wanted to find those programs to be involved, how do they go about finding those programs that you're putting out there?
Yeah, sounds cliche, right? But head right to the website, and I would put a plug-in to download our app. Our app is it's really user friendly. It'll keep you up to date on all the things that are going on in Maine, as far as like when to put in for your moose tag and that sort of stuff. But you'll have access to finding those programs. There's no cost for most of these. We've got a long growing list, and you can search right on there. You can click right through our event manager. It's pretty simple and painless. And then you'll get a follow-up email invite with all the details on the who, what, when, where, why, and what to bring, and that sort of stuff. And then once you actually register for a program, oftentimes you'll get an email. If you drop a new program, you'll get a notification that,
oh, very cool.
Yeah, hey, the department just offered a new workshop, might be of interest. And so the website has got an education and programs tab on there. And for safety courses, the way our website's designed is it's hunting, trapping, ATV, snowmobile, boating, fishing, that sort of thing. And you just start off at the top and just go down to safety courses, and there's lots of options. And they're all offered under our Maine Outdoor Skills branding. So you'll see them all kind of housed in that little kind of that branding format. But,
very cool.
Yeah.
Sounds simple enough. Well, thanks so much, Ron, for taking the time to sit down and have a conversation with me. It was great. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I did too. It was great to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. And I'm going to start putting in for my moose tag for sure.
All right.
And when I pull it, I'm going to give you a call.
I'll be calling names this June 20th. So you're around.
If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who's thinking about getting into hunting, or maybe someone that you'd like to start hunting with. I'd also love to hear from all of you listening. If you have any questions or comments for the show, please send them in at community@evolvinghunter.com. That's community@evolvinghunter.com. Any questions you send in, we'll answer them live on the show, and our guests will get a chance to weigh in on their thoughts as well. And if you want to follow along, make sure you're subscribed to the Evolving Hunter podcast. We're on Instagram and YouTube at Evolving Hunter Podcast. We've got loads of more conversation and hunting stories coming, along with practical conversations about skills, ethics, and what it takes to grow as a hunter. So please stick with us and follow along. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep evolving. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. One last thing before you go. If you're thinking about getting into hunting, before you go and buy gear or plan a hunt, you need the right foundation. That's why we're so excited to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. They have state-approved online hunter education that teaches real-world safety, ethics, and responsibility, not just test answers. If you want to start hunting the right way, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolvinghunter and get certified today.